and welcome to the first edition of the Ambassadors Roundtable. Since the outbreak of the deadly second wave in India, the world has stepped up to help India. The European Union was one of the first blocs to announce assistance, and since then, leading European countries have shared critical supplies like oxygen, ventilators and antiviral medicines with India. In recent weeks, European Union nations have also brought their own outbreak under control. How did they do it? What lessons can India and the rest of the world learn from Europe? And what role can the EU now play in assisting India with its pandemic response? To discuss all of this and more, we have a very special panel of guests with us. We have with us Romania's ambassador to India, Daniela Sezonov, Poland's ambassador to India, Adam Burakowski, Italy's ambassador to India, Vincenzo de Luca, and Denmark's ambassador to India, Freddy, Svane. Thank you all for joining us here on WION. Ambassador Sezonov, let me begin with you. This last year, this pandemic has seen a divided world, divided in its response. We've seen vaccine nationalism. We've seen all that can go wrong with global leadership. But at the same time, when India struggled with its second wave, we also saw the world coming together. How do you see this global response for India in its time of crisis?
I think, namaste to all, first of all. Thank you for inviting us to this roundtable. For me, it's the first one. I arrived in India 3 weeks ago, so very, very recent in those very difficult times. I think the international response for India was tremendous. So it was a very fast mobilization of forces, to say so, in the name of humanity, of friendship, and of international cooperation.
I'm sure India has thanked its friends adequately for the kind of response it has seen. Adam Burakowski, almost a week back, Poland shared 100 oxygen cylinders with India, and this assistance came almost a month after Poland's own health system was stretched to the limits by the third wave. How did your government ramp up its own capacities during the surge, and at what point did you think that it is important for your government to step in when India needs help?
So, first of all, COVID is a global problem, and our government understands it very well that COVID should be fought not only in our country but globally, because this new wave in India could cause a problem to other countries, including Poland as well. That's why we came with help. The other reason was, of course, the humanitarian one, because we understand what is going on. We also had two big waves. We also had our problems. Now we are trying to cope with it. We are getting out of it, also because of vaccination. There is a strong program of vaccination. I see here in India it is as well. So we hope that we will overcome it as soon as possible. Poland is a part of European Union, as you mentioned. All of us here, four ambassadors, are from European Union, and European Union is the biggest contributor of the aid for India right now. So it was just a gesture of heart and of understanding what we did, and we will continue supporting India. There are some Polish NGOs that will supply on a private basis, non-government to government, but on a private basis, they will supply some medical help.
Ambassador Luca, your country witnessed one of the worst outbreaks. Italy was one of the major hotspots in the world last year, and you've already witnessed 3 peaks there. How was Italy able to manage the outbreaks, and what lessons do you think the world can learn from it?
Yes, you're right. Italy was the first country affected in Europe by COVID-19. It was the first country to adopt very strict measure, a national lockdown for 2 months last year. And Italy is also one of the countries, and Europe is in favor of a global response to a global challenge, as you rightly said. Pandemic is a global challenge. We have to reinforce the global cooperation. That's why we will organize on 21st of May in Rome, but in digital, a global health summit together with the European Commission in our capacity as president of G20. And I have also to say that the present collaboration and cooperation between European Union and India started already last year when we organized the repatriation of Italian and European citizens here and of Indians from Europe to India, together with a very close and fruitful collaboration and cooperation between the European governments and the Indian government. So I think we have found a way to work together with the Indian government, and we will do this also in the coming months, because we need more cooperation. When there is a crisis, we have to make available capacity all over the world, as in the case now of India. Oxygen, medical material, medicine has to be made available when they need this. And also for vaccination. European Union, together with India, was the area where we exported more vaccine to other countries all over the world. We have to go on in these efforts. We have to make the vaccine available all over the world. This is an effort, this is a challenge for European Union, for India, for all over the world. Thank you.
Indeed it is. And you said something very, very important. We need a global response for a global challenge. And I'll come back to that point, and I want all of you to express your views on that. But for the moment, let me take this with Ambassador Svane. Denmark has been setting an example for the world, Ambassador. Your country largely avoided the third wave, while several major European nations were struggling. How did you do that?
Thank you very much indeed. I think we just follow the normal procedures that we also have seen here in India, and perhaps we're also lucky in the sense, but we did the lockdown, and we have also had a very tough lockdown until recently, and only the last few weeks we have started reopening. But I think it's important now. India is facing a humanitarian crisis, which is beyond the boundaries of India. So it calls for international cooperation, and we need to really exchange our insights and experiences and so forth. But it takes a lot of common joint efforts, mutual efforts. And it's not just about governments, it's not just about authorities, it's basically also your own responsibility as citizens. You have to wear a mask, you have to do the physical distancing. So I think that's a recipe that we followed in Denmark, and cross fingers that this will continue. But lockdown, containment zones, and strict kind of rules to be applied and implemented. Very, very important. Thank you.
Very well said. I think the virus has changed, but the rules remain the same on how to evade the virus. The mask should be on, and the distancing should at all times be followed. Ambassador Sezonov, variants are driving India's second wave by most estimates. The double mutant that was first identified in India has now been seen in 49 countries. Your country detected the first case of this mutation last month, and since then, among many other countries, you've restricted travelers from India. What I want to ask you is, are travel restrictions enough to tame a virus that clearly knows no boundaries? We've seen it all of these past 14 months.
Yes, indeed. I mean, this is the main problem of this global crisis. It became global because the virus did not know boundaries. I mean, by restricting traveling, it's a way of trying to keep away the most vicious kinds of viruses. We are just coming out also of a strict lockdown in Bucharest and in several counties in Romania. I mean, when I left for India, we were ourselves in a lockdown, but the situation improved with measures, with social distancing, with wearing masks, with avoiding, with restaurants and cultural centers closed, with a lot of our life now looks totally different than what it was 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago. Yeah, unfortunately, this is what we are facing now, and in order to be able to contain it, we have to take measures, including restriction on travel.
Indeed. Ambassador Burakowski, the Polish health minister has appointed a research team to study mutations from around the world. And that's a much needed field of research that more countries need to look at. Do you think such efforts are now needed on a more global level to end this pandemic, with countries, of course, also being transparent and raising a red flag whenever they see a mutation? And has the World Health Organization, in your opinion, been efficient and fast enough in raising the alarm against these new potentially dangerous variants?
So we should be aware that this virus has a few mutants already, and most probably it will have more. That's why we should be very disciplined in handling with the virus. And in my opinion, lockdown is the last resort of this whole story, because lockdown is damaging the economy. And our country tried not to introduce maximum lockdown at any time, except for this very first weeks 1 year ago, when nobody knew what was it. Now we are trying to open some branches, some places, even when the situation is still not totally under control. But this third wave in Poland is receding, and we hope that there will be no next wave. And once again, I stress the importance of vaccination, because vaccination gives the immunity to the people, to the whole population. And so all forces should be focused on vaccination, which is the case of my country and other countries of European Union. So we hope that slowly we'll get out of this COVID, and I wish India the same. That you should overcome as soon as possible, and we can return to normalcy and boost our trade and other types of relations, which is a very big hope for us, because India is a natural partner for European countries, which was very clearly shown last Saturday during the European Union-India summit in Porto, Portugal. Thank you.
Ambassador Luca, Italy too has banned travel from India, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka till the end of May. Now, a UNICEF report this month says that the deadly new surge in the region, and I'm quoting, threatens to reverse global gains against the pandemic. According to you, what are the most worrying trends of this surge?
These travel bans are, of course, temporary to avoid the spread of infection. We have two important instruments now for fighting against pandemic. One is vaccination, and in Italy we reached 30% of adult population already vaccinated with the first dose. Second is the testing. With these two instruments, vaccination and testing, we can also be more flexible in adapting the measures to the evolution of the infection. As some colleagues before me said, it's very difficult to introduce twice a national lockdown. We experienced a national lockdown. India also experienced last year a national lockdown. Now it's important to test and to monitor the evolution of the pandemics through testing more and more, and also to adapt local lockdown when the situation becomes more difficult. And also when we have a spread of infection, you have also to introduce some restriction in the movement and the transportation. That's why we introduced these temporary measures for India, for other countries affected by this wave. Also, when we suffered the second wave in Italy and in Europe last October, we didn't introduce a new national lockdown, but we differentiated the measures according to the extension of the spread, dividing the territory into three colors, red, orange, and yellow, according to the evolution of the infection. I think this is the most reasonable and also sustainable way, because as rightly said, Adam, is not easy to have an impact on our economy of national lockdown, and we can suffer a lot also of the impact of these measures. So we have to strike a balance between the fight against pandemic, that is priority, and also adapting the measures according to the evolution of the infection.
Indeed. Ambassador Svane, speaking of lockdowns, Denmark has a unique position in Europe as lockdowns ease. How are you planning to reopen your borders for the rest of the continent, and what lessons can India and other countries take from the lockdown protocols of Denmark?
A very good question, of course. I don't think you can just copy-paste. It will have to do with the size, the scale, and the actual situation. But as I said before, we had a carefully crafted lockdown, and now we are gradually opening up. And tomorrow, in fact, we are opening up for many Europeans and people with vaccination passports. So I think we are following a little bit the kind of protocol, but this is for those who have really come through the waves, and India will, of course, have to prepare for the end of this second wave, whether it's happening this month or will go into next month. Of course, you have to prepare for it. But basically, there's no solution to it except for vaccination, as my Italian colleague has mentioned. The testing is very important, but also that you and I, as individuals, we take our responsibility. It's so important, and then you will see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. Ambassador Sezonov, I think all of you on this panel have at some point made the point that vaccination is the way out. Now, experts say that mass vaccinations are the only exit strategy, just like you guys have said. But by April, 87% of all doses administered in the world were limited to the rich countries, and the European Union is one of the blocs that has a large stockpile of shots. Do you believe that the EU should come up with a strategy to share these vaccines with the world?
Of course, I think this is the next step. The vaccination campaign is going on in Europe because we faced three waves already of the pandemic, and the third wave in our case came when in India you thought that the pandemic is already gone and vanished. So I think this will be the next step. The problem now is that, as you know, that everywhere they try to increase the number of the production of the vaccines. So it's everywhere it is done this effort to increase the number of vaccines produced in order to split them more equally in all parts of the world.
Ambassador Burakowski, your thoughts on vaccine inequity? That is a major problem, and as Ambassador Sezonov said, more companies need to produce vaccines, which brings us to the question of patents as well. So sharing vaccines with poorer countries and allowing more companies to produce.
So I'm not a doctor, so I cannot estimate which vaccine is better than the other. But as far as I know, all of them are quite okay. And India produces actually 2 vaccines. And in the first round, it was very good move for India to give the vaccines to the neighboring countries. And I hope that the capacity of production in India and all over the world would be bigger, more. And actually, my government is strongly advocating the free vaccine formula for all, that the companies should really share this formula to other companies that want to produce, to make it accessible to all the world, the whole population of the world, from the top to the bottom. And that should be accessible also for these who don't have resources, and we should convince the people to get vaccinated. As we know, in every country there are some anti-vaccine movements, which, if they are limited in a scale, I mean, this is their issue, of course. Nobody can force anybody to get vaccinated, but we should really convince them and show them that the vaccination is the only way to get back to the world that we had before COVID, because we are all totally exhausted, and we really want this to end and to live our normal lives. Thank you.
Ambassador Luca, your thoughts on Europe perhaps in need of a mechanism and a way to share excess vaccines with the world?
I think Europe has been one of the first area in the world to contribute to export vaccine, and also was India, of course, at the early stage of the vaccination. After the emergency here in India, the Indian government had to stop the export of vaccine. But we have to work together in the context of a COVAX initiative. Europe is part of this initiative because it is good news from the United States to have the license available. But the problem is not only the license, the problem is the production, the problem is the distribution. In many countries, we have to organize these facilities. Otherwise, the problem remains, that we will have the more advanced country maybe vaccinated at 60% and the rest of the world, because nobody is safe until everybody is safe. That's for sure for this pandemic. So we have to keep in mind this point. And also, this is the lesson also of the recent evolution here in India, but also in Europe. Once you are vaccinated, you have to keep some measures, like wearing masks and physical distances, because vaccine do not prevent the infection to further spread. So we have to be very careful. We have to be vaccinated. We have to be careful about how to contain and prevent further waves of these pandemics.
Ambassador Svane, do you believe that it's time for patents to be removed for richer countries to share excess vaccines with the world? Because as Ambassador Luca said, nobody is safe until everybody is safe.
Yes, of course, it's a very highly political question that will have a lot of different aspects. I think I'll answer your question in a different way by stating this is important to have international cooperation. And I think that's a takeaway from this almost 1 year long pandemic, and it's continuing. So what it calls for is international cooperation, and whether different tools should be applied, like the waiver of patents, or I think that's for others who will have more insight in this. What are the consequences of doing contra? What are the results that can be achieved? But the international cooperation to deal with these pandemics so important, and I think also G20, G7, EU, many other blocs will definitely look into that to secure that in the future we are more well prepared. So the international preparedness should be really increased. That's the answer to your question. Thank you.
As a senior diplomat, Ambassador Svane, I'll ask you this. Have you seen instances of international cooperation and global bodies coming together? We earlier made a point about a global response to a global challenge. But would you say that at some level, global bodies may not have been able to rise up to the occasion?
I think you can see a lot of reports being floated around, and they will state that the international cooperation was not up to the mark. And I would not blame anybody, because it was a huge pandemic, unprecedented, and how to respond to that. I mean, you were almost constructing the aircraft in the air, and you were not sitting in the cockpit, you were sitting at the tail. So how to move forward is very, very difficult. We are learning a lot while we are practicing, and we are defending our people and so forth. But basically, it calls for international cooperation. Whether it's good, mediocre, I don't know, but the recipe is more cooperation. Thank you.
Ambassador Luca, I would like your thoughts on this. Global response to a global challenge. Do you see a global response taking shape?
I think there is more awareness, as rightly Freddy said, compared to the beginning of this pandemic. And this was unprecedented in the extension and the gravity of the situation. So certainly the international organizations were not well prepared to face globally this challenge. But now there is more awareness and also more trust in the international cooperation, because we need to build trust between country, nations, population, also trust vis-à-vis vaccine. As rightly said Adam, at the beginning, at least also in Italy, there was some reluctance in having a vaccine. Now, much less, I would say. But this is a process, and we have to enhance the capacity of the international organization, of the countries, to tackle this pandemic.
Right, Ambassadors, I would like to continue this conversation, but we're out of time. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us here on WION.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.